Hey there, darling. Welcome to my garden. My name is Jess, and I am so excited to give you a tour today. I'm so excited, actually. I woke up like an hour too early, and I've just been waiting for the sun to come up so we could do this video. Before we jump into all of the details of varieties and all the fun garden stuff, I want to take a minute to kind of reflect. This is my 8th season to share my garden with you, to do tours just like this video. In fact, I don't know that I would actually be YouTubing now if it weren't for garden tours. The year that I started, we had just exhausted our very small budget building our garden. I had spent my birthday money over the winter buying all the seeds that I could with it. Started everything from seed. I was so absolutely obsessed and in love with the garden, and I didn't have a lot of people in my life to share it with. I was absolutely used to getting in conversations with people who'd be like, "Oh, you garden?" and I would just info dump on them and share all these different facts. I would see their eyes glaze over. It was a real bummer. So when I made my first garden tour at the time, everybody told aspiring YouTubers to keep your videos under 10 minutes, to move things really fast. And I shot a 40-minute garden tour going through. At the time, the first one, I didn't actually even share a lot of the details of varieties and different fun facts about them and ways to grow them. Because I was used to that boring people. I actually shot that video for me, thinking I'm gonna miss my garden in the winter, and even if nobody else watches this, I know I'm gonna wanna watch it again. So I made the record really for myself. It was my first YouTube video to ever get 1,000 views within the first 24 hours, and I continued on that year to do garden tours throughout the season and learned that you did want to hear the details. You did want the information and all of the geeking out over varieties, and I found a group of people whose eyes did not glaze over when I shared what I was passionate about. Of course, the channel continued to grow, the garden continued to grow, and the rest is history. But as we launch into our 8th season together, walking through my garden, I just want to say thank you for being here. It has truly made all of the difference for me. I'm gardening in South Carolina, right outside Columbia, the Midlands area. It's zone 7B, 8A. We have a really long growing season here and pretty mild winters, which is why there's a lot of the produce that's sold in the country grown in my area. And it makes a really great place to garden. Of course, we have really hot summers, and being 2 hours from the coast, we deal with really intense humidity. So it comes at a cost, but things not growing is not an issue that I have. It's more disease and pests that I deal with. So to tell you a little bit about my garden, this is my 4th season growing in this garden. We moved from Arkansas to South Carolina 4 years ago now. And we took this raw land, turned it into our farm, and laid out where basically you come in the driveway, and to the right of the driveway is first our orchard, and then there is what I call my garden belt, which is basically between our driveway and pasture. There's about an 80-foot wide strip. I've got 2 high tunnels that are 26 by 60. I have an in-ground space that is about 30 by 60. We're currently working on a perennial berry space in the middle of our garden. We're going to be putting a chicken coop in this space, and then you come into our raised bed garden, which in the middle of that is our glass greenhouse and our cottage garden. At this point, I'm not even sure to tell you how many square feet of growing space I have. I'll have to measure that out at some point this season. We've recently downsized. We actually used to have more garden space than this. But we are able to grow pretty much all of our family's vegetable needs. We're really getting into our fruit production as our orchard gets more mature, as a lot of our berry bushes get more mature. And obviously, this isn't just a utility thing. I definitely plant aesthetically. I love beauty. I love a beautiful garden. It helps me to stay engaged with it. And I think overall, a garden that you want to be in is absolutely going to be more cared for. All right, so we're going to start down on this end of the raised bed garden and just work our way all the way down. The first thing I've got here, actually I need to harvest, are some radishes. Let's see. So this variety is called Malaga, and as you can see, some of them have gotten really rather large, like this. And these are going to have a really nice sweetish flavor. Sweetish, not Swedish. Some of them are on the smaller side. And this variety specifically, but any variety of radish, they are going to get spicier as you grow them throughout the season. So I like to grow a good bit of them early on. I think I didn't want to come out. This one split. It's alright, it can go in the compost. You can see this has a really pretty purple plumish skin. I will probably replant some more of these. It takes, during prime conditions, it takes radishes only like 21 to 25 days to get to this point. I probably planted these a little longer ago than that. I think it was probably more like 30 days. And you can see some of them were a little on the larger side. But that was also considering they were growing in cool nights a month ago. Radishes are a really great thing if you want to grow something fast because they do come to fruition so quickly. And a lot of people have only had radishes in a sense of like a few slices on a taco or maybe a little bit in a salad, and so you might think, what in the world could I do with that many radishes? I may end up pickling these just because I haven't had pickled radishes in the fridge in a little while and I really like them, especially if you're making a plate of something that's kind of heavier. Let's say you're gonna make like breakfast scrambled eggs, maybe some bacon, potatoes, and you've got a lot of heavy components with like rich flavors or fatty flavors. Something like a pickled radish in that just really cuts straight through. Raw radishes in that is a really great thing. But if you're not big on pickling or raw, if you quarter radishes and roast them in a 400-degree oven with like oil and salt and pepper, the flavor mellows out tremendously. It's a good substitute for a potato. It kind of has more of that feel to it. Definitely a little different than a potato, not quite as starchy, but very mellow. You can also cook them in an air fryer. And I think it's awesome that they grow so fast and that you can use them so versatilely because, I mean, it gives you the opportunity to round out a plate from your garden. So actually, let me go around to the other side of this bed. So this trellis here has tomatoes down here. It's going to have more tomatoes. I paused on planting my tomatoes because I was having some pest issues I needed to deal with. I was having a very serious imbalance of lots of roly-polies just terrorizing my garden from some wood mulch we put in the garden, and then we took the wood out. But yeah, we've been dealing with that imbalance. I think I've got it somewhat under control now. But these tomatoes I planted first, and they're doing really great. As you can see, we're almost up to the trellis. I've not pruned yet. I will probably do my first prune this week. I typically will try to prune not when we're about to have a bunch of rain, because obviously when you're cutting branches, limbs off your tomatoes, you're leaving an open wound on that plant. And when there's going to be a lot of rain and it's potentially going to be splashing soil back off the ground to your plant, it kind of just ups the chance that you may end up with sickness in your plant. So I usually like to prune when we're going to be dry for at least a day or so those wounds can scab over. But these are mostly Cherokee purples, Cherokee carbons, one that's called Cherokee chocolate. That's new to me this year. I bought these plants from a local nursery. And then we have pineapple, Carolina gold, and Mr. Stripey. Notice down here that I actually have one volunteer tomato coming up, and I think I'm going to let this grow. I'm not sure what this will be, but I'm pretty sure that last year down here on the end I had my Dr. Witchy's growing, which is a really big yellow. Now this tomato looks like a cherry tomato, so it could end up being a seed that came over. This, you know, the branches are a little on the smaller, it's a little more compact, so we'll see. I may let that stay here. There's a little rogue asparagus growing from seed. All right, here I've got marjoram. This plant and that plant are both marjoram. Obviously it's really come back with a vengeance. I probably need to prune it back some. I have plenty dried, so I may end up pruning it back some and just giving it to the chickens. On this trellis and this one, I have silver slicer cucumbers. Now you'll notice I've got some plants here. Here there are no plants. Again, roly-poly, so I'm going to need to replant those so that hopefully I can get those established. Right now we're going to see a lot of open spaces. I think as a whole my entire garden is probably 25 or 30% planted. Obviously It's early in the season, but we're working on different spaces and have been amending and everything. I'm really focusing on growing for fresh eating this year, and of course I'm going to end up preserving a good bit just because you don't have this much garden space without having excess. I'm really trying to like rein it in and succession sow some so that I'm not just like absolutely putting everything out here at the same time and then finding myself completely overwhelmed with harvest by the middle of June. But that said, we're going to see a lot of blank spaces today. I still have a lot of areas to plant, and I will be doing that throughout the season. Here I've got a Japanese cucumber, and I know I'm going to butcher this name, an Anagajikai. I'll put the spelling up on the screen. Again, kind of somewhat sporadic. Here, I didn't get one down here. I may try to move. I've got two that made it right here, so I may try to move this one down to see if I could get 3 established. I like to have 3 on the bottom of an arch for cucumbers. And down on this corner I've got borage, and of course this is going to get really big and filled out, but at that point the cucumber will have grown up enough, which is the beauty of vertical gardening, that this shading the roots will actually be a benefit to it, and the leaves will be up here and able to get all the sun that it needs. That Japanese cucumber is new to me. My daughter Malia has been on a kick with cucumber salads, and a lot of the cucumbers that are commonly used like in the recipes for that are Japanese cucumbers, so that's why I'm growing those. But I didn't feel like I needed 6 plants worth of something that I'm just trying, so I just did one side. And over here I have a melon, which is just like a honeydew melon called Anna's Charente. I swear I sometimes like shy away from varieties that I know I'm gonna have to pronounce on camera and get wrong, but this is supposed to be just a really good orange flesh cantaloupe type melon. I've got a little basil here. Most of this is empty, and when we come around into this bed, down the middle of this bed is garlic. Garlic is all over my garden right now, just fit into places where it's in the middle instead of dedicating like an entire bed to it like I've done in the past. Spread it throughout. Garlic is supposed to be a good companion plant. We'll see how it goes. It's my first year doing this. Oh my goodness. There is an example of what I have been telling you guys about the imbalance of roly-polies. Look at that. So the orange is working. I'm not going to get distracted by this right now, but as soon as I'm done filming this video, I'm going to come scoop all of these guys up and go put them on my compost pile so they can go do what they're supposed to do there. You'll notice the tomato plant that they're next to is pretty chewed down. They got these few here pretty good. I'm going to have to replant those. But golly, that's a lot of bugs. These tomatoes are doing okay. They have mostly been left alone, and this is a variety of cherry tomatoes. I like to plant all my cherry tomatoes right here beside my pavilion because we like to come out here and snack on them. These few were planted first, so you can see that they're bigger, and they're also at the point of being ready to prune, and that one could probably even be tied up. I can't believe we're that far along, but that's awesome. All right, in these short beds, right here I have some cutting sunflowers, some blue spice basil, which smells amazing. This is garlic, and mostly what's going on in this bed is stuff that's volunteered. Like there's some zinnias. Some of these things I'm going to pull out. Like these are okras. I don't need these growing here. That's just volunteering. That's a little tomato plant that I don't need. But other than the garlic, mostly this bed is not planted. There's one lone beet. I'd put a whole bunch of beets here and they were eaten pretty early on. It's been a rough spring. Right here on both sides of this trellis, I have a hybrid variety of melon called Snow Leopard. I've not grown this, but I've actually purchased it. There's like a natural food store here in Lexington, close to where I live, and they sold these last summer, and I bought one, tried it, really enjoyed it, and ended up finding the seeds. Found it was a hybrid, which is pretty common for something that you buy at a store. People who are growing to sell a lot of times will use hybrids because they can be more pest resistant. So I got some seeds and I did the whole trellis of this. Now down here in this hot mess of a bed, I've got an okra issue. So this is where I had Alabama red okra last year, and we cut some of the stalks down and they still had some pods on them, and one okra pod can have like 50 seeds in it. and as you can see, they're growing. I have weeded out so many volunteer okras out of this bed. I finally decided to just let them all come up because I was weeding them daily and more were coming. So it's probably about time for another weed through. But what I'm going to do is just, you know, space out a handful of these seedlings and grow them from the ones that have volunteered. Obviously, if I let all of these grow, they would choke each other out and they wouldn't produce anything. There is some nasturtium on the corner that I put in, and I had put a row of beets down the middle before I realized that we were going to have this issue. So they've kind of grown up. Yeah, this is the silliest thing. What a problem to have, right? This bed is largely unplanted. Again, we've got like some volunteer okra and beans that I'll clean out when I come and plant. These are volunteer sunflowers. Again, there's some asparagus popping up. So this is mostly just what's growing of its own volition. I do have some garlic down the middle. This trellis over here is going to be tomatoes as well. And then on this side, I'll plant something else. Where these sunflowers are growing, that they're not in the way of other things, I will let them grow. I did put some zinnias down here. I wanted a nice like cluster growing. And then this is fennel that's still doing well. I've harvested a handful of bulbs. This has been here a couple years, comes back each year. And then sadly, this was my parsley, and it just very recently kind of came to part. I think there's probably something messing with its roots because it just wilted overnight. Oh, back over here, I've got some Mexican oregano is what this is. It smells really nice. I'm glad that that's come back healthy. This little trellis right here, the last few years I've had blue butterfly peas growing here, and they drop seeds. I haven't had to replant them. I'm always nervous every spring, like, oh, should I have planted some? But I did see that we have some blue butterfly pea seedlings popping up here, so that's nice. We'll end up with quite a few of those here. Here I've got a few different squashes, zucchinis. They've got some little babies on there. You see that little baby crookneck squash in there. And on this side of this trellis, I have a melon, a personal size melon called Hannah's Choice. This side is unplanted still. Other than the Mexican oregano, I've got some variegated sage here. It looks really nice. And some garlic. I haven't planted anything else in this bed yet. Over here, I've got some bantam corn planted. A few of them did not come up. I'm probably going to go ahead and re-sow them because at this point these are getting big enough for me to see. There's like a block right there that didn't really germinate. With corn, it's really best for them to grow really close together as far as the pollination goes. So I will fill those spaces in. I've got tomatillos here, just green tomatillos, 4 plants of those that look really nice. They're starting to blossom and set a little fruit, which is great. And then on this trellis, I have not planted anything. These are bitter melons. I grew them here last year, and you know, a couple of them didn't get harvested, fell down. And I've been pulling the seedlings up. I actually don't think I want to grow bitter melons again. We just didn't use them a ton. They are interesting, cool novelty. It was nice to try something new. But I would prefer to give this space to something that I know we're going to actually eat a lot of. So on this trellis, no, it wasn't this trellis, it was that trellis. I can't remember. Dang it. Now I'm going to have to wait for it to germinate for me to plant something else. One of these is planted with tromboncino squash, and I can't remember which one it is. I think it's that one. So yeah, this one I haven't planted yet. I'm pretty sure that's accurate. Here I've got some more bantam corn. I've got, throughout the garden, there are perennial flowers, like these are snapdragons, and these are perennial here. They die back, they come back. And I appreciate that. I like the color in the garden. It's great for the pollinators. But I haven't planted the rest of this yet. I was just waiting to see how that corn was going to germinate. It looks pretty good. More garlic in the middle of this bed. As I said, there's tromboncino squash that I put here, which is a really long, it's a vining. It's technically something we would call a summer squash because we typically harvest it young with tender skin, but you can let them get hard. And usually they produce so much that we'll harvest them and eat them, and when we get tired of eating them, we'll let the rest of them get hard and store them to give to our animals. I've got all this metal decor in my garden. I sent my friend Matthew a picture of this the other day because this actually was in his guest bathroom, and when he was moving, he gave these to me because he was just getting rid of stuff. And he was like, hey, do you want this metal decor? I know you like it for your garden. So I sent him a picture, and he's like, a much better existence than in my guest bathroom. No, they're gracing my garden. Here we have more garlic. As I said, it's all over. This is a pineapple sage, which is going to get really big and beautiful and have really pretty pink spikes for flowers. Of course, I've got my green stalks that have strawberries in them here in the garden. I've got 3 that are full of strawberries. I have one down here that I had moved. I put a couple strawberries in it, but I actually still need to plant this one. Now into this bed. This is actually elephant garlic here on the end. The rest is regular, but you can see these are huge. I got some cinnamon basil here. I just put that in. Here I have some, can't remember what this is. Dang. You may know. Maybe you can tell me. I sewed this on a video and now I'm drawing a blank as to what it is. I didn't mark it, obviously. All I know is that I sewed it really heavy. I'm pretty sure this is a cucumber, but it may be a melon. I can't remember. I sewed it heavy because the seeds were old. And obviously it came up heavy, so I'm gonna have to thin it out now. There's another planting of radishes back here. Here I have Cocazelle squash that I also sewed heavy because the seeds were 3 years old, and I just wanted to make sure. Let this be your note that seeds do not expire even when they are past the sell-by date that are on the seeds. I think every one that I put in here germinated even though they were years old. Right here I've got a nice planting of yellow rutabagas, one of my favorite things that grows in the garden this time of year. Delicious roots that can be roasted in a pan with chicken, that can be boiled and mashed like potatoes with sour cream and chives. Sometimes we'll saute some bacon and then slice rutabagas up or cut them into smallish chunks and put broth in with the chopped bacon, and then boil the rutabagas in that, and it just makes this very simple, basic soup that's just like broth, rutabagas, and bacon. So tasty. Oh man, you know what that is? Those are ground cherries that are volunteering, which is a dang good thing because I planted a bunch of ground cherries and they completely got devoured. So I'm going to move those. I'm glad I saw them. Here, I'm very excited for this. So here we have Jack and the beanstalk beans, or sword beans. I bought these seeds on Etsy and they were huge. Like the bean, actually here's one that's just coming up. So this hasn't popped out yet. That's how big the bean seed was. That's it right there, getting ready to open up with the plant. But these grow in these huge vines and grow beans that you can harvest when they're small and eat, or they can get really, really big. And I just thought they were so cool. A lot of times these things that are kind of novel, like the Trombonsina squash. I mean, these really long bulbous squashes, things like the sword beans. I grow them because I love to see something interesting, and will eat a certain amount of them, like harvesting them young and eating them. But these kinds of plants end up being great fodder plants. So we have a farm, we have animals, and anywhere where we can close the loop of resources and basically grow things that we can feed back to our animals, that lessens our feed bill, and it means that nothing's wasted. So I get to grow things that are unusual, and I'm not worrying necessarily about getting the maximum use for our family or to personally eat out of every single thing, because if my animals eat it, then it hasn't been wasted. I've got some more sunflowers right down here. I will do small clusters of sunflowers and stagger them so that they'll be blooming at different times. I do love cutting some flowers to put in my house. At one point I decided I would try to do a whole high tunnel for cutting flowers, and then I realized I didn't like cutting that many. Now, I like having them blooming in the garden. I like being able to bring a bouquet into the house, but I've learned what works for me is to just do little areas of things like sunflowers and zinnias and stagger sow them so they'll be blooming at different times. So I always have flowers in my garden and in my home. All right, so these 3 planters here, I've got Jerusalem artichokes. You'll notice the one on the end is growing much more thickly. This was my original one. I just got a small bag of Jerusalem artichokes and sowed it in here. And then last year we took everything that it grew. Obviously we missed a lot of little pieces, which is why that one's so thick. And we split it into these containers also. So I was multiplying them. Jerusalem artichokes are like a really good food source if you're looking to grow like a survival garden, you know, like if you want to guarantee that you have food sustainability and security. There's a cookbook writer that I absolutely adore. His name's Nigel Slater, and he writes about his garden, I mean, so poetically. You could just read his cookbooks, and he writes about Jerusalem artichokes and shares some really great recipes for them. They are known for the potential to give a person, let's say it politely, gastrointestinal distress. To less politely, they are also called fartichokes. They grow and look kind of similar to like a Mexican sunflower. So they get really tall, they bloom with these yellow flowers. I thought just from a design standpoint that they would be really cool to have in these tall birdies beds here at the end of the garden. And my plan is in the future, as these 3 fill up this year, that I'm going to thin them out and actually plant them along my property lines and along the tree lines and allow them to naturalize in some places. They can grow very invasively, so you wouldn't necessarily want to like put them in the ground in a cultivated garden space that you didn't want them to take over. But along the tree lines and stuff, I just thought it would be really great to have food growing wild that, you know, we could access if we wanted to. And if we don't want to, they're beautiful flowers. So here are these radishes. These are black Spanish radishes that I put here. I think probably with this shading and different things, they've kind of grown at a varied rate. Right here I've got a bronze fennel that is massive. I might need to thin out some of the bulbs here just so some other ones can get bigger. You can eat fennel bulbs even when they're small. They don't have to be really big. This is lovely. And you can also use the leaves. Like the leaves of fennel make a really nice mild tea. It's really great for if you're having any sort of tummy issues or anything like that. So it's also really pretty. Here before too long, I don't know, within the next month, caterpillars for the swallowtail butterflies will take over and consume all of my fennel and dill that I have in my garden. And I usually harvest it up until that point, so I will go ahead and dry some of these leaves for tea. I've already made several fennel salads out of the bulbs from that fennel I had over there. But I usually let the butterflies have them whenever they come. This is their host plant, so I get some, they get some, it works out. Here I have a lemon thyme. It's very citrusy, it's beginning to bloom. I'm probably gonna have to cut this back some because thyme will end up over years just taking over a massive area, and I just don't need that much lemon thyme, so I'll probably break that off a little bit. Let's see, I don't know how much detail I should go into the cottage garden because there's probably 100 varieties of plants in there. I'll show you the high points. Here I've got some mint. These are Nanking cherries, also called bush cherries. They're not a true cherry. They are actually kind of a member of the plum family. The bushes here have been ripening a few. Some of them are red, but they're not ripe yet. They taste like a tart plum. They're really good. I've got these plants in this little bed. I put some more in the ground over in our initial berry area. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to move them. But these are plants that you can take cuttings from and root, so I may end up putting more of them out. When they get ripe, you have to get them because the birds will get them. I guess being red, they really catch their eye. But here's my chamomile bed, which has been producing like crazy. I have harvested a lot of it already, and as you can see, there's a lot more to go. And right here I have my eggplants. I did a few like Black Beauty eggplants, like the big classic purple ones, and then I have a couple of the smaller ones, like the small one called Gretel. This bed will fill out, and there will be so much. I mean, just a 4x4 bed, it's incredible what it can produce. All right, let's go briefly into this space. My goal for my cottage garden was to primarily just grow ornamental things, and of course the practical part of me kind of came through. So I ended up getting, like, this is an ornamental oregano that's kind of covering the ground right here. I did plug in some zinnias in these spaces, and I've got like comfrey back here, which is incredibly useful medicinally and in kind of permaculture uses for the garden. Back here on the corners, I've got dwarf pear trees, more comfrey behind the greenhouse. Over here I've got my fancy irises, different variety. I think on the farm total I've got something like 27 different varieties of irises at this point. When I first moved here, lots of viewers sent me irises, which was amazing, and then I ended up buying some. I love the really vibrant ones. So as you can see, we got a lot of plants out here. This is what's going into the herb and tea garden that I'm establishing in front of my house, and then also what's going to fill out our perennial berry beds, which I know Maya's been working in that space this week. I still have a lot of my tomatoes and my peppers, which I paused on planting tomatoes until I could get kind of the insects under control a little bit, and then the peppers I was just waiting for May, which today is May 1st, so they're going in just here very soon, down in the high tunnels. Now, the cottage garden is full of roses. Some of them are lovely heirloom tea varieties, and some of them are Walmart $3 specials. I'm non-discriminatory in the things that I plant. And there are just multiple different perennial things in here. Obviously, I've got lots of irises. This is a strawberry lemonade baptisia. It's absolutely beautiful. I'm always so sad that these don't last longer. I think that's kind of the hardest thing about the perennial garden for me, is that things peak and they have a week that they are absolutely stunning. Right now these purple irises, they're called gamecock irises. My oldest son is at the University of South Carolina, is a gamecock. Of course, I planted these before that was the case, but being in South Carolina, I thought I would go ahead and add them. And they look amazing for like 1 week. And then it's pretty much just the green part and the occasional bloom. Same thing with the baptisia. They look really, really amazing. And then they're just really big green bushes, but they do have an interesting foliage. My roses are interesting though, because they are great for tea. I do end up harvesting rose petals for tea. I have a few that are a little more fragrant that do better than others. Over here, I'm about ready to take the weed whacker to the mint, to be honest. Like, I can't even walk through here. Thanks to these things, this mint really took over, but it won't hurt it to weed eat it. I can definitely push it back some, and it's just going to keep growing. Mint is very resilient. This year, I will say the perennial garden is more along the lines of what I envisioned when I started it. This is my favorite time of year for the perennial garden, like early to mid-May. I feel like it looks its best at this point. It ends up getting really wild, and a lot of things do peak as the season goes on. And it's a different kind of beautiful at the end of the year. I mean, things get really big. I've got stuff like these cannas here. I mean, they'll be towering as the summer progresses. All the hibiscus plants here will end up opening up and being extremely showy. All around, it's just a really exciting space, and I really love it. On the back side of the greenhouse, I've got my bathtub full of thyme, because I love bath time. Here I have, ooh, look! It's not ready yet. I thought I was going to pick that blueberry, but I'm not going to rush it. Oh, let's take one moment to appreciate the black hollyhocks, because they're not going to last very long either. These plants are pretty sick. They reseed every year, and they get rust every year. But they do bloom, and as they produce their seeds, I will let them drop right here, and they can come back next year. It's funny to me how things grow differently in different areas. You know, in Arkansas, I had black hollyhocks that were, I don't know, probably like 6 or 7 feet tall, super healthy and beautiful. And everybody told me when I came to South Carolina that they were very prone to rust here, which this is what rust looks like, if you're wondering. And I still tried. And you know, I'm not even sad, you know, they get sick, but I still let them bloom. I still let them reseed. I probably wouldn't put them in a crazy prominent place, like, and I probably wouldn't grow tons of them, but I don't mind the fact that they get sick. I still get to see their flowers. That's a new one. Oh, I can't remember this one's name. I planted quite a few of these Japanese irises last year. I got a bunch of rhizomes, so this is my first time to see this bloom. This little section on the side of the greenhouse is difficult because this gets very boggy. So I've struggled with things. Now this is a Confederate rose is what they call them here. I'm not 100% sure what the other name for them is. I think it's in the hibiscus family. Anyway, that gets massive. That thing will end up being like 10 feet tall. It's taller than the greenhouse by the end of the season. And beautiful. I've got some chrysanthemum in here. But I put all these irises because irises like having their feet wet. Especially Japanese irises. Those gamecock irises down around the fountain are also Japanese irises that don't mind having their feet wet. And there are some things in here, like this is fairly weedy. It's just hard to keep not weedy. Oh, this is cool. I did put a few pitcher plants in here. You can see this. These are actually carnivorous plants they're native here in South Carolina. But I put some of them here since it stays so wet. And they seem to be doing okay. They came back this year. But yeah, this little area is a little bit of a struggle, especially early on in the season. It doesn't look like a whole lot, but it does end up filling out, and the things I want here do end up kind of helping overcome the weeds. Here, we've also got some inoculated mushroom logs, kind of taking advantage of the bogginess. But yeah, this looks kind of like a mess right now, but there's actually a lot of beautiful stuff going on here. All right, so right here you'll see the structures built up. We had a shade cloth over this area. Hurricane Helene ripped it up pretty good, and Maya decided to use that as an opportunity to kind of rebuild his structure to something that would hold it a little tighter. So right now we've got the trellises down. There will be trellises in these beds where the tomatoes will be. This whole row right here is tomatoes. These are my favorite tomatoes. This is Dr. Witchy's, Paul Robeson, and Abe Lincoln, this whole row. I decided to plant a lot of my favorites this year. There's garlic on the other side of the bed. Down on this end is horseradish. It ended up, we put a tiny little bit of root in here. It took hold. I've harvested so much horseradish from this. Actually, you can kind of see the soil level is a little bit lower because it started growing back, and I just decided to leave it. We didn't amend that area, but after I harvest this year, we're going to have to add some soil back. From all the harvesting, we've pulled a lot of soil out. So this bed was the one that had roly-polies the worst, and I put beans in here, and very sadly, they have all been decimated as they have come up. Even though I had put out some fruit, I had put out some different things, I think I'm going to have to add, you can see little nubs there. I think I'm probably going to have to get aggressive and use that Sluggo Plus stuff here. These two beds are really don't have anything going on in them other than a little bit of garlic. That one down there is going to have tomatoes. I wasn't even going to put tomatoes in here because the roly-polies being so intense. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to do here yet. My memory card got full, so I had to run back in the house and get another one. I figured while I was there, I might as well make a cup of tea. What is it about having a mug of something warm in the morning while you're walking through the garden? There's this Johnny Cash quote where he was asked in an interview like what his definition of paradise was, and he said of his wife June Carter, this morning with her having coffee. I love a good love story. I absolutely love that. I actually have that like quote written out in my house because I just think it's so sweet, and you know, that's the kind of love story that I want and that I have, you know, with my sweet Maya, that your paradise is like in the everyday things. But I often think of that quote with my garden too, because it is definitely paradise with me in the morning with her having coffee. All right, so I'm standing here now. That's where we just were. This area here is where we're gonna have a chicken coop by the end of the season for my fancy chickens. I got some silkies and stuff like that, millefleurs, bantam cochins, like little cutesy chickens. I wanted to have chickens really near the garden. So we have pastured birds that we move around for eggs, and I like being able to move them around. I think that it's good for them, it's good for egg production. The downside of that is they're not always anywhere near my garden. You know, I love having chickens close by, that if I find some hornworms or if I find like an orange rind absolutely covered in roly-polies, that I can throw those to my birds. That if I have a fruit that got rotten or split or something like that, I can throw them to my birds. I just love having that symbiotic relationship right close to the garden. And also I just wanted to have some pet chickens, so that was why we're doing some fancy ones in here. So this used to be like lots of sweet potatoes and potatoes, and I've decided to cut this back a lot because I don't really have great storage. So we have a shed with like a mini split in it, and that's what we use for our pantry, and we are able to keep it like artificially cool throughout the summer, something like a root cellar, but not really cool enough to keep root vegetables for a very extended period of time. And so inevitably they would end up sprouting and stuff. And so I was doing all this work to grow all this food, and ultimately I wasn't even getting to use like half of it because we couldn't keep it long enough. So we decided to cut this back, hence putting the chicken coop in, and then we're establishing in this whole middle section perennial things. So I'm moving some of the berry bushes we have elsewhere in here. I'm gonna do some muscadine vines in here, and then Jeremiah just built this. We moved our asparagus bed back to this area, and my idea is by having all of this in the same central area, we can fence it, protect it from any sort of like wildlife, and keep the pets away from it. And by having things together with like things, like having all of my blueberries in a couple of different beds, I can give them what they individually need. Like blueberries need a different pH level than other things. Overall, I think it's going to be really good. I think it's going to be nice to kind of have it all central. Now over on this side is what remains of my in-ground garden. So I've been gardening in this space in the ground since my first year gardening here. The soil here is now just glorious. It's fantastic. This is the only area of my garden where we actively till. I don't like tillage on a large scale, but I think when you're doing things like potatoes and sweet potatoes where you're digging the ground up anyway, it doesn't really matter so much. But I also will be doing other things in this space, like some more corn. I did bantam corn in the raised beds. Out here I'll do just like a full size sweet corn. I'll do more okra. I did Alabama Red down there, which it's where all this stuff is volunteering. Here I'll do a local heirloom called Kibler okra that we got from a man named Dr. Kibler that Will is friends with, who has stewarded heirlooms for a very long time. And Kibler okra just grows super well here. It's like a green, like very spineless, like extremely productive, stays soft on a larger scale. I'll do my chicken and dumplings, cowpeas in the ground here, as well as obviously the potatoes and some sweet potatoes. Oh, and Dutch fork pie pumpkins. I'll do some Dutch fork pie pumpkins in the ground. I have considered like just tilling up some other place to put Dutch fork pie pumpkins, letting them go crazy. Because I really like having a lot of them to feed the animals over winter. Last year we harvested, a monstrous amount of Dutch fork pie pumpkins. And not only did we eat a lot of those, we just fed the last ones to the chickens like 2 weeks ago. And they were starting to get pretty soft at that point, but that's pretty good. They stored from October until almost May. So I definitely want to have some of those. Now they volunteer everywhere. Like last year there were probably like 50 Dutch fork pie pumpkins out in my woods. They grew on the side of my house, but I already know that if I'm like depending on them to volunteer, they probably won't. So I'm kind of thinking about what I want to do with that. I definitely have not given them as much space this year as I did last year. So I'm thinking about if that's something that I want to try to do, or if I just want to just be okay with not doing it. So this is going to be fun to track the progress of this space. A lot of this isn't even planted yet. It's high on the to-do list here in the coming weeks. So I pretty much wait until end of April, early May to plant out like cowpeas and okra. Those things just do a little better when it is like firmly warm during the days and at night. So it's time now. And I'm very late on my potatoes this year. You can see they're just barely coming up. But it just rained so much this spring that I did not get them in. It's fine. We'll just be later harvesting them, and that will be completely okay. Alright, here's the other place that I need to do a little harvesting, is here in this high tunnel. Actually, we're going to come from this outer edge. Oh, it actually pains me to harvest these cabbages because they're so pretty growing here. This whole little section I think is beautiful. I've got curly kale here, which I've been very steadily harvesting and using, and of course it's still growing. I've been juicing this, I've been making soup from it, roasting it, sauteing it. We've used a lot of kale. This is a dill plant. Here I have some spinach that's pretty ravaged by pests, and then here we have celery looking nice, and then the cabbages, which, man, they're so pretty, but as you can see here, we're starting to get pest damage, and as soon as this starts, it moves really quickly. So at this point, if I don't harvest it, I'm not gonna get it. I would say this is probably one of the biggest struggles I have as a gardener. Like, I want to harvest things. I want to eat things. That's why I'm growing them. But I love when the garden is full and lush and beautiful. And I hate harvesting things because then it's empty and it makes me super sad. It's actually why I plant my garden so diversely and mix things out, because then I never have to have an empty bed. I mean, in an otherwise lush and full garden. So I try to stagger everything, but then I'll end up with these spaces that I adore, and I feel so bummed when I have to pull the stuff out. But this is kind of the nature of growing brassicas where I live. As soon as it starts warming up, the pests get so intense, and once they come, I mean, they'll just completely ruin your harvest in a matter of days. I noted that this cabbage was getting a little pest damage yesterday, and like that one is probably going to be half lost because of how deep that pest damage will be. Hey boy, good morning.
Hi.
Yep. Yeah. Have a little nibble of kale. Hey, look, there's some peas right here. Look, right here on the trellis you're standing under. Turn around, there's more behind you. See the peas? They're probably more right now, you just eat the pod whole. Sweet peas, yeah. Pretty good, huh? Garden boy came out to find me this morning. So with these cabbages, I'm harvesting them, outer leaves and all. There's a couple leaves I'm leaving in here, and I'll just leave them sitting here until I'm ready to replant this space. Now for the ones that have damage,
Okay, sauerkraut.
can I make sauerkraut? That's my plan with this. When I'm harvesting a lot of cabbage at once, it does store in the fridge for a pretty good bit of time. So we'll probably eat sauteed cabbage maybe a time or two out of this. I like making like egg rolls, egg roll in a bowl, which is basically like sauteed cabbage and ground pork and kind of like some Asian-ish flavors, ginger, and you use like soy sauce or tamari if you're gluten-free. But then if I have any excess, I will go ahead and make sauerkraut. You know, Ben, I might have Will help us make some sauerkraut.
This is my favorite one.
I know his is your favorite one. I've made sauerkraut. I have made sauerkraut many times. But Will made sauerkraut out of some purple cabbages we had, and Ben has now reminded me many times that Will's sauerkraut is better than mine. So we might have to get Will to help us make sauerkraut. I know, well, I've got these others that are nice. I'm going to have to pick those other ones really small, because if the worms are already getting this bad on this one, they'll just move down to that one.
I see a worm.
I know, they're in here deep.
Just
Yeah.
toss it, Mom.
Yeah, they're in there too deep. Alright, go give it to the animals. They'll be happy for it.
Which one?
What do you think? You want to run it down to the chickens? You can drive the side by side. Hey, just be careful with my mug that's in there, okay? Don't drive like a crazy man. Alright, well, let that be a lesson. Whenever you see damage starting on something, especially like worms on a brassica, just pull it out right then, because I could have saved that cabbage had I harvested it yesterday or the day before. Just the very earliest signs, because they had already basically bored all the way through. There were worms all the way through it. I am going to go ahead and harvest these two. They're kind of sadly small since those pests are kind of taking over at this point. If I leave these out here, they're just going to end up going the same way. You can spray BT is the organic pest control for little soft-bodied worms. Basically, you want to spray it in the morning and they'll eat it and it breaks down their digestive system and kills them. But I'm going to go ahead and just pull these off. I may end up spraying my kale with some BT because these worms being here means they're going to just start decimating that. In my experience, like where I live, where it's so warm here, I can battle these bugs for a little while and extend my harvest for a little while, but my goal is usually to just have all my brassicas wrapping up by mid-May. It's getting too hot for them anyway. When you are averaging over 80 degrees every day or 26 Celsius, your brassicas are likely going to go to seed soon anyway. So I don't typically try to battle the pests just a ton. I try to just garden when they're not here and get my fill of things. It does stink when, like, I've been juicing kale every day. I don't really want my kale to go away yet. I'm very motivated to keep that. So again, I may do the BT for that. It is organic, and maybe try to extend it a little bit. But my expectations of having kale, it's going to be done by the end of May for me. All right, bring those. And I'm going to grab this. That is one full harvest basket. All right, let's look at the rest of this tunnel. Oh, my poor cabbages are gone. It's okay. We're celebrating the harvest. The garden changes. This is the nature of the garden and why we must enjoy it. It's why I like doing regular garden tours, so I can capture these moments that it is beautiful and then enjoy the harvest I get from it. All right, right here I've got purple magnolia sugar snap peas and these beautiful bicolored blooms. They make really great pods. You typically harvest these young, like at this point, for snacking on the pods or sauteing them. It is starting to get a little warm for these. I'll probably have maybe a couple more weeks with them. I've noticed like here's another one of these that has started to dry up. I've already pulled like 3 off that have done this. And the pods are not as sweet as they would have been even just a couple weeks ago. Now in this high tunnel we have 50% shade cloth, which kind of does allow us to extend the season, you know, into our warmer months. And that's why I planted these in here, but we'll see. Here I have calendula beginning to open. This is blooming. This will get really big and grow for a while. And this bed is leeks. And I would even say that some of these are probably to the point that I could start harvesting them. Also throughout this bed, we have some carrots, which these reseeded. I believe it was Danvers that was here. So it's kind of nice that they're growing underneath this. Once we harvest the leeks, I think those carrots will really grow a lot more once they're getting a little more light. And I think I'll probably be harvesting leeks. I may even start trying to use some of the bigger ones now. In the next bed over, I've got shallots, which is very exciting. I love shallots. They just feel so fancy. I don't know why, but I really enjoy them. They're not quite bulbing up yet, but they will soon. On this trellis, I have some cucumbers that I put in here, trying to extend the season a little bit. Cucumbers tend to get bitter by about late June here, and my hope is if I get these established, maybe we can still have cucumbers into July. In this bed behind me, I have another round of carrots. I've got a few succession sown rounds of carrots. I pulled one of these out the other day, and it's maybe like this big. Actually, I'll just show you guys. All right, we're just going to pull one of these out so I can show you the size. I am going to pull from where I've got 2 growing close together so that I'm essentially thinning while I do this. There we go. So these are still kind of on the small side. Like if I really needed some carrots or something, I could go ahead and harvest these, but by giving them more time to grow, obviously I'll get more food. All right, let's get this thing clean. Break. Okay. So good. These are also, I think these are Danvers too. Just like a plain orange carrot. On this side of the bed, I've got some artichokes. These actually grew, these were volunteers that grew because I let some of them go to seed out in the middle over here. So we moved these in here. My hope is that having them under the shade cloth, that they would bloom a little later, and it looks like that's going to happen. These will be perennial, so I can leave these here and they will continue to grow, and then they will also reseed. So I will have artichokes here from now on, and in the future they may end up taking up this whole bed. I had previously grown some on the outer bed of the high tunnel, and it worked really well, and I got gobs of artichokes. The problem is that I couldn't lower the plastic because they were so big, and I'll show you the one I've got growing out in between the two. And so I didn't like having them there because they're really pokey, and they were actually threatening to like poke through the plastic. So I think having them here will give me that same effect, but in a, you know, a more feasible space. This whole back half of the high tunnel, I've got to kind of pull a bunch of stuff out. Still needs a little bit of amending, and then needs to be replanted. Everything that's over here is volunteers. Like that's a watermelon that's volunteering. I actually will probably let that grow and get all through the walkways. There's carrots in here, there's peppers in here. I didn't plant any of this stuff. You know what this is? This is basil it's some kind of basil. I can't tell you exactly what the variety is. I can smell it, but I can't fully place it. But that's a bunch of basil. So I may leave some of the volunteers that are here. I know there's a few pepper plants in there, like this is pepper plants. But obviously if I left all of this, it would just choke each other out and not do anything. Here I've got some banana plants that I let come back every year. They touch the roof of the tunnel, and they end up getting killed back before they can actually produce any bananas. Y'all hear the drone overhead? Jeremiah's getting the footage for this video. I've been getting into smoking meat, okay? And in the last 2 months, I've smoked quite a few things, and I definitely see that it has a learning curve. I definitely see it's not something that you can just like haphazardly do and figure out. Like, there is definitely some art form to it, but it's not terribly hard, and I've really enjoyed smoking meat. So I'm kind of interested in potentially using those banana leaves, like wrapping things in and smoking them. So I've been excited for these guys to come back. All right, here we have the onions, which this is a Texas sweet variety. This is the first one that's actually bulbing up. You can kind of see the bulbs kind of happening down there at the soil level. At this point, I will start using these. So over the next few weeks, like when I need an onion, I can come out and just harvest the bigger ones. These will probably be ready to harvest before too long. Maybe 3 weeks or so. The tops will start kind of browning, falling over. They're trying to go to seed a little bit right now. A couple of them are, which is not great. I mean, that typically means they're coming to the end of growing when they start trying to go to seed. But this variety is first. And then I've also got some purple ones. There's a little bit of the purple ones here. Those take a little longer. That's red Creole. Here I've got some ragged jack kale, some yellow beets, more onions of multiple varieties. I've got a yellow, also I think some sort of Texas variety in the name. This is more red Creole. The red Creole are interestingly the ones I've been noticing going to seed the most. They try to set a flower, I just break it off so that hopefully they can put a little more energy into bulbing. I get these onions in, I ordered the starts from Dixondale, and then I plant them out like January, February, which is when they suggest for my area. I have better success growing them in the high tunnel, but I think this coming year I'm going to start them from seed, and I'm going to start them in the fall and just try growing them over the winter, because that's what a lot of the local people have told me works best. So we will obviously have a good deal of onions this year. This isn't anywhere near as many onions as we need. I would have to probably grow this entire high tunnel to grow a year's worth of onions, because I use so many of them. But it is nice to have some that we grew. The flavor is wonderful. I don't try to grow the whole high tunnel's worth because I can't use those fresh. With this, I'm able to use a lot fresh, and I still have to freeze or freeze dry or dehydrate some because they end up sprouting in my storage situation before I can get them all done. All right, in between the tunnels, I have got lovely strawberries like crazy. You can kind of see all these peeping out, and I see my boys coming down the driveway. They're the strawberry pickers. I was really bummed last week because we had this very heavy rain. I'd already harvested probably, 3 gallons or so of strawberries, and then this heavy rain came, and like pretty much all the berries that were out here, even like that weren't ripe yet, started to rot. And they just had tons of bugs in them. I had to harvest a whole bunch and give them straight to the chickens. And I was bummed because I was like, man, that's all the berries. And then just after getting all of the rotting berries off the plants, they just started producing more. So we're back in having lots to pick. I probably have at least another 3 or 4 gallons out here that we'll pick today. And they're so ripe and delicious. To me, the mark of a good ripe strawberry is that it's red all the way through. You just don't get that without growing them yourself, and I just absolutely love it. So here's my big artichoke, which I'm actually about to cut a couple of these off. This one's a little looser than it should be. I was kind of hoping that a couple of them would get done at the same time, and I left this one. It's still going to be edible, but it's best to harvest them when the heads are still a little on the tight side. I'll add these to my harvest basket here. Pretty good today. I got a pretty good little haul of radishes that I'm going to pickle. I've got, what, 5 heads of cabbage, smallish, that we can eat and make some sauerkraut, and a few good artichokes. Oh, in this bed right here, these are dahlias. They come back every year and bloom. They're really beautiful. And I have lots of strawberry plants that are just everywhere. And these are all just from runners that it's like, okay, we have them, might as well put them somewhere. I have thought about trying to consolidate these a little more, like pull them out of all the random places, because ultimately we end up having fruit go bad. Just because you have to pick strawberries pretty much every day or every other day, because they are so soft bodied that you'll have, like, there's a good instance, like a bug got a hold of that one. And having them spread out makes it harder to do that, because, you know, just things get missed. So further down into this, we've got another artichoke. But this is exciting. Right here I have a really lovely blueberry bush that is obviously pretty happy with its lot in life. These aren't ripe yet, but they're getting pretty close. I keep picking strawberries and eating them. I mean, wouldn't you? Alright, let's pop in this last tunnel. My boys all just came down to tell me that they rescued a turtle that was in the driveway. Alright, last tunnel. Here are some beets. I've been harvesting them. The heat is getting to them. They're starting to go to seed. I'll probably pull these out, use what is still good, maybe pickle them since I'm going to have a lot all at once. And then I may leave one of these in here to go to seed, just so I can save some beet seeds. Here I have some more eggplants in this bed that I planted. These are, I bought these as started plants. They're kind of like Asian varieties of eggplants. I just went ahead and got them. I didn't really need them. That bed down in the main garden will be enough eggplant for me, but sometimes plants just jump into my cart. I don't know how it happens. That's some zinnias that reseeded. I'll leave those there. Here is a little bit of a mess of me just not having the heart to pull things out. This is rhubarb. I planted it here forgetting that these calla lilies were in here. They're kind of all growing up together. The rhubarb won't last super long into the season as it starts getting hot. My hope was that this would become perennial in this area. It's probably almost big enough that I can harvest it. My thought was I would make something like rhubarb strawberry together, and then I'll let the calla lilies grow. But my hope is at the end of the season to move the calla lilies and leave the rhubarb here. I just got so excited to see this because this has just very recently come up. This is holy basil that has reseeded. I recognized a big oversight in my seed starting this year that I had not started any holy basil. Last year it reseeded so much in my in-ground garden that it was just everywhere. I mean, there's literally probably 1,000 plants of it that we were just mowing it under. And then it occurred to me this year as we had the in-ground garden ready to go, I was like, oh man, we've mulched this and I haven't seen a single holy basil coming up. And I was like, what if I don't have holy basil in my garden this year? But here it is. It has come at last. I'm not surprised to see it here. I did have some actually in one of these square beds last year. So to have it popping up right here just means the seeds got blown over here most likely, and I will just let it have the whole end of this bed and have a big section of holy basil, which I love having for tea. Tulsi is what it's also called. So these beds are freshly amended. There are some volunteers, like those are thistles I got to pull out. That's a zinnia. Now this was the tunnel that I had thought I would make a cut flower tunnel. We moved all the dahlia tubers out of here and they're spread all over the farm. But the way it is with tubers is, you know, if you have a little piece that stays in, a lot of times they'll prevail. So like that's a dahlia. Down there on that end is a dahlia. There are a couple more popping up down in this area. And I'm going to leave them. I think it'll be really nice to have them just sporadically throughout all the other things I'm going to plant in here. I do have a few beets here that are finishing up. I've got some more calla lilies over here from the cut flowers. This whole bed is sweet pea flowers. They smell incredible. I'll let them keep growing until the heat starts to kill them. There are a couple of stumps in here, logs. They're inoculated with mushrooms, but when the sweet peas are done, I'll rip them out, amend this, and replant it. Mostly, this tunnel is going to be like peppers. I'll put some tomatoes in here, so this is going to be a lot of nightshades. This is going to be like the summer to late summer tunnel. So over there, pretty much everything I showed you in here and the things I'm planting, aside from a few exceptions like the artichokes, pretty much everything in that tunnel is going to peter out and wrap up by June to July. And we will have harvested all the onions, the carrots, what's left of the brassicas, those like extension cucumbers and all those things. And so that's where in the fall I'll plant the brassicas for this coming winter. I like to keep one tunnel full of food that we eat out of throughout the winter, and then one tunnel full of food that we eat out of the summer, and then of course there's some overlap. So this is going to be getting heavily established and starting to fruit while we're heavily harvesting that one in the early summer, and then it's going to shift. We'll be heavily harvesting this one in the late summer, early fall, as these things all kind of peak. And we'll be resetting that one and getting it established. Now, there are a couple exceptions. Like here, I've got a bunch of saffron, as well as something that's a mystery. Maybe turmeric, not really sure. Maybe some sort of flower. I can't really remember what's going on here, but we'll figure it out together. Another planting of carrots, which I can show you. These are getting to be pretty good size. Actually, down here on the end, still needs just a tiny bit of thinning. Ben always wants to pull carrots when he comes down here, so I leave an area thick so that he can do that. So let me show you one that's actually been thinned. So this is where they're growing close together. Not that much bigger, but this is the ones that are thinned. So again, I could start harvesting these at this point, but if I leave them in, I'll get more. I just harvested this week my last planting of carrots that were huge, and I'm still using those. So I don't need carrots. I've been harvesting from those for all of my juicing and cooking. And then if I give these like even just 2 more weeks, they're going to be a lot more sizely at that point. And as far as these kinds of root vegetables go, as long as they're not struggling with the heat and starting to try to go to seed, I more or less will leave them in the ground and just harvest from them over the course of weeks. You know, I'll come out and harvest however many I need to make a side for dinner. I'll harvest however many I need to put through my juicer. If I'm cooking a soup, I'll come get, 6 or 7 carrots to cut up and put in the soup. And my hope is that through harvesting these, and then I've got that second planting over in the other tunnel, that'll be all the carrots that I need until it gets probably late June. I'm hoping they'll hold out that long. Carrots don't like to be hot, but with the shade cloth, my hope is that they will actually last through that. And I think they will. Down here on the end are the only peppers that I've actually planted out. These were some I purchased, so they were ready to go in the ground. And then this row, I've got some Bet Alpha cucumbers that I'm gonna secure up to the ceiling of the tunnel. This space is mostly blank, but it's actually gonna be getting a lot of attention. I'm hoping by the time the next garden tour you see that there will be a lot more going on out here. There we have it. There's my garden as it stands at the beginning of May of 2025. So I'm really hoping to do very regular garden tours this season, potentially even weekly. I will tell you, they get a little bit hard to shoot because to me it feels like the same thing, and I'm watching this change every single day. I'm out here every single day, but in retrospect, when I look back at them, I'm always like, wow, it's so cool, because when I'm not seeing that garden every single day, watching those tours and the progression of them is incredible. So I'm doing it for winter me. I know I'm gonna want to be able to visit my garden when it's gray and cold and sleeping in the middle of the winter, but But I also love being able to share it with you guys. It's incredible to feel like you have a friend walking through your garden with you. But I do think there's also a lot of benefit for growing gardeners who are learning what to expect from plants, what to expect from their garden, to be able to walk through someone else's garden that's been doing it a little longer than them, to know what struggles other people are facing. You know, I want to be very open. Like, I'm struggling really hard getting some things established with the roly-polies. You should know that. It's not my fault. It doesn't make me a bad gardener that those things are happening. It's just part of it, is that sometimes you're going to win a lot, sometimes you're going to lose. It's always still worth it to show up and keep growing. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today and all the days you do. If you like seeing these on the weekend, if you like seeing the premiere format, I know some of you may be watching this later, but this video is going to be premiered. Let me know. I like that because I like being able to chat with you guys, and I'm thinking maybe we could just have an established time that you can expect. We're going to be chatting in a garden tour. Thank you again. I bless you. Until next time.